Welcome, everyone, to today's deep dive. If you're joining us today, you're probably someone who, loves getting completely blindsided by a story.
Oh, absolutely. That feeling where you think you know exactly where a narrative is heading, and then bam, you're pulled into a completely different universe. I'm thrilled to be here to dig into this with you.
Same here. So the mission of our deep dive today is to explore a truly fascinating, bizarre collision from our source material, which is an extended excerpt from Alison Espach's novel, The Wedding People.
It really is a masterful setup. We're looking at what happens when a woman's absolute darkest moment crashes headfirst into the ultimate symbol of manufactured happiness.
Right. $1 million luxury wedding.
Yeah.
What we get from this text is a brilliant, darkly hilarious exploration of human resilience. So, to set the stage for you, imagine packing your bags and heading out to a picturesque 19th century hotel in Rhode Island.
Sounds lovely, right?
You'd think. But instead of arriving for a relaxing weekend getaway, you're arriving with a bottle of your cat's tuna-flavored painkillers.
Yeah, that detail always gets me.
It's so bleak but so specific. Your singular plan is to end your own life. This is our protagonist, Phoebe Stone. She's a 38-year-old adjunct literature professor, and her academic specialty is the Victorian marriage plot.
Those classic 19th century novels, think Jane Eyre or Pride and Prejudice.
Exactly. The stories where everything in a woman's life resolves neatly with a wedding at the end. But Phoebe's own life is, well, it's the furthest thing from a tidy ending. She's divorced. Her husband, Matt, left her for her colleague, Mia.
Which is just a brutal double betrayal.
Beyond brutal. And she's grieving years of grueling, unsuccessful infertility treatments and a devastating miscarriage. On top of all that, she feels completely stuck in an academic career that hasn't moved forward in a decade.
She is just entirely depleted.
Okay, let's unpack this. Phoebe arrives at the stunning Cornwall Inn in Newport, fully ready to enact her final plan, only to find the entire hotel has been hijacked by a massive, utterly extravagant wedding party.
The visual and emotional contrast right from the start is incredibly striking. Phoebe is entirely stripped down emotionally and physically. I mean, she brings essentially no luggage.
Right.
She's walking away from her entire life, treating this hotel as the absolute end of the road, and she walks straight into a lobby that is practically vibrating with energy.
It's overflowing with matching luggage sets, hyper-enthusiastic guests, and just the overwhelming chaos of a multi-day luxury wedding.
She's stepping out of the world, and everyone around her is celebrating the loud, expensive beginning of a new one.
And when we say extravagant, we really mean it. The text spends a lot of time detailing the sheer scale of this wedding for the 28-year-old bride, Leela or Delilah. Just to give you an idea of the sensory overload Phoebe walks into, Leela is dropping $50,000 on the opening reception alone.
Just the opening reception.
Yes, she's special ordered rare orchids all the way from Borneo, just for the centerpieces. She has cocktail glasses that are hand-sprayed in guanciale fat.
I still don't even know how you drink out of a pork fat sprayed glass without ruining your outfit.
Right. It sounds like a dry cleaning nightmare.
Right.
But it's happening here. And she flew in the exact same jazz band that played at Prince William's wedding. It's the absolute height of absurdity.
And that absurdity is the perfect backdrop for the inciting incident, because you have this meticulously controlled environment, and then reality literally bleeds into it.
Yes, the elevator encounter. Phoebe and this bride, Leela, end up in the ancient hotel elevator together. The doors refuse to bounce back, and Leela accidentally gashes her hand, getting blood on her pristine, incredibly expensive dress.
And Phoebe just completely drops the social script.
She has absolutely zero filter left at this point. She bluntly confesses to the bride that she's there to kill herself. Now, you'd think the natural human reaction to a suicide confession would be empathy, or at least shock for the other person's well-being.
But Leela's reaction is entirely self-centered.
Completely. She isn't horrified out of pure compassion for a dying woman. She's horrified because a suicide in the hotel will ruin her meticulously planned $1 million wedding week. A week which, the text reveals, was funded by her late father's dying wish.
What's fascinating here is the thematic brilliance of this juxtaposition. We have to look closely at Phoebe's background as a scholar of the marriage plot. She spent her entire professional life studying texts where marriage is the tidy, happy reward at the end of a long struggle.
The ultimate resolution.
Exactly. But Phoebe is living the messy, devastating aftermath of a failed marriage plot. Her story didn't end happily at the altar. Her life completely unraveled after it. Meanwhile, you have Leela standing right next to her, frantically, almost desperately, trying to execute the perfect beginning to her own marriage plot.
It's like they're on opposite sides of the same mirror.
Precisely. The wedding itself serves as this incredible microcosm for societal pressures. The author uses it to show us a world where authentic negative emotion is essentially outlawed. We see the forced cheerfulness of the guests. We see the bridesmaids who practically speak in unison.
Who Phoebe hilariously nicknames High Bun and Neck Pillow.
Yes. They're completely stripped of their individual identities. And then there are these lavish gift bags handed out to strangers containing bizarre items like German chocolate wine. Everything is curated to present an illusion of flawlessness.
Which makes you wonder how a bride like Leela handles a massive, glaring flaw, like a suicidal guest in her perfect hotel. She doesn't just call hotel security, does she?
No, and that's a pivotal character choice. Leela takes it upon herself to manage the situation, treating Phoebe's despair as just another logistical hurdle she has to smooth over for her wedding to go off without a hitch.
That absolute intolerance for negative emotion is what makes the ensuing standoff so ridiculous. Because Leela actually tracks Phoebe down to her roaring 20s penthouse suite. She barges in to stop Phoebe from smoking on the balcony and basically begs her to delay her suicide until after the wedding week is over.
It's such a bizarre negotiation.
It really is. But Phoebe doesn't just back down. She taps into her professorial roots and completely defies the bride. She calmly explains the Proto-Germanic etymology of the word balcony, pointing out that it derives from a word meaning beam, just to prove to Leela that technically she isn't smoking in the non-smoking room.
It's a hilarious defense mechanism, but if you look deeper, it shows Phoebe's intellect sparking back to life. She's using her academic knowledge not for a stuffy university lecture, but as an act of pure, petty rebellion against this overbearing bride. She's finding a tiny foothold of agency in a situation where she thought she had given up all control.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because of this bizarre combative standoff, these two wildly different women actually begin to bond.
Stripped of all the usual societal pleasantries.
Exactly. Without the exhausting need to be a good, polite woman, they end up sitting there, sharing a shockingly honest conversation while passing a bottle of that bizarre German chocolate wine back and forth.
And Leela just starts oversharing everything.
She unloads. She tells Phoebe about her wealthy waste management tycoon father. Apparently, his final dying words, delivered on speakerphone from the hospital, were literally just obol essences.
Which is just wonderfully absurd.
And she unloads about her hypercritical gallery-owning mother who uses long, winding monologues as weapons against her own family.
The psychology behind this interaction is profound. You see that sometimes true connection can only happen when the stakes of polite society are completely removed. Phoebe's suicidal ideation ironically frees her.
Because she has nothing to lose.
Right, because she believes she's about to die. She doesn't have to perform. She doesn't have to pretend to care about Leela's wedding arrangements or filter her opinions or be polite. She's acting as the most authentic version of herself. And paradoxically, that raw honesty is exactly what draws Leela to her.
Because Leela is entirely surrounded by yes men.
Exactly. Leela is surrounded by bridesmaids and family members who are just telling her what she wants to hear, desperately maintaining the fragile facade of the perfect wedding. Phoebe is the only real, unfiltered thing Leela encounters that entire day. Their interaction suggests that genuine intimacy requires us to drop the scripts we've been handed.
But that brief moment of connection doesn't instantly cure Phoebe. The bride eventually leaves, and Phoebe is alone again in the penthouse. The darkness returns. She actually follows through and takes the tuna-flavored cat painkillers.
A really heavy, stark moment.
It is. She lies down on her coconut-scented hotel pillow, fully expecting this to be the end. But as she's waiting for the pills to take effect, she hears the wedding reception happening down on the patio below. Specifically, she hears Leela's mother, Patricia, giving an impromptu speech to the crowd. And Patricia is seemingly insulting Leela right in front of everyone.
It's a very specific, humiliating anecdote. Patricia is telling this story about trying to get a young Leela to use her imagination to guess what ducks are saying to each other. And Leela, completely deadpan, practically tells her mother, "I don't speak Spanish."
Wow.
Yeah, the mother is publicly framing her own daughter as someone who has absolutely no imagination.
So Phoebe is lying there, literally fading away, but she hears this. How does a humiliating story about ducks stop someone from ending their life?
It taps into something foundational about who Phoebe is. She's a reader. She's a lover of stories and narrative structure. She knows the inherent architecture of a wedding speech.
Right, the setup and the payoff.
Exactly. She knows that no matter how embarrassing the anecdote starts, the mother eventually has to pivot and turn the speech into a compliment. That's the rule of the genre.
There has to be a resolution. And Phoebe is suddenly gripped by this overwhelming primal curiosity. The suspense is actually too much for her. She realizes she absolutely must know how the mother turns this speech around.
She has to know the ending.
Yes. So she forces herself off the bed, drags herself to the bathroom, and throws up the pills. She literally saves her own life simply to hear the end of a stranger's wedding speech.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the metaphor here is incredibly powerful. For months, Phoebe has felt like her life's narrative was over. She even compared her life to a Russian tragedy, where the protagonist goes through all this brutal struggle just to die pointlessly at the end.
A completely closed book.
But that sudden instinct, that undeniable burning urge to hear the end of Patricia's speech, it reminds her of the fundamental human need for narrative resolution. It shatters the absolute certainty of her depression. She realizes that she isn't at the end of a tragedy. She's still in the middle of her own story. The desire to know what happens next is, in its purest form, the very essence of wanting to live.
The desire to know what happens next. That is such a compelling way to look at survival. And what happens next for Phoebe is a scene that completely shifts her trajectory. Fast forward a few hours. It's now 3 a.m. That classic grief hour.
The absolute worst time to be awake.
You know, the one, the middle of the night where the world is dead quiet, there are no distractions left, and you're just trapped alone with the darkest parts of your own mind? Phoebe, having survived her own attempt, feels this restless energy. She decides to go down to the hotel's hot tub. Right. But she obviously didn't pack a bathing suit for a suicide trip, so she just wears her fancy black lace underwear and a hotel robe. She gets into the hot tub, and soon after, she encounters a handsome, bearded stranger who is also awake and roaming the hotel.
This is where we see the real resurrection of her character, because they immediately strike up this incredibly witty, sharp banter.
They really do. They start debating whether Charles Darwin had a sincere or an ironic beard. Then they get into this hilarious argument over classic literature, where Phoebe insists that Moby Dick is actually just ship porn that culminates in a giant whale having a climax that destroys everyone.
That kind of intellectual playfulness is crucial. It's the exact kind of dynamic Phoebe used to share with her ex-husband, a fellow academic. But here, with a stranger, it feels entirely fresh.
It's detached from all that heavy, suffocating baggage of her past.
Exactly. She's discovering that her wit, her intelligence, and her mind are still very much intact. And more importantly, they are still attractive.
And she really leans into that newfound boldness. She sits there in her underwear and she starts analyzing the completely arbitrary societal rules we all follow. The rules that say wearing a bathing suit in public is totally acceptable. But wearing underwear, which covers the exact same body parts, is somehow shameful.
She's deconstructing the social norms in real time.
She decides in that moment, under the cover of night, to reject the rules entirely. She drops her robe, stands there, and bluntly tells the stranger she wants to fuck him. Just raw, unfiltered desire.
It's a shocking moment for the reader, and certainly for the stranger in the hot tub.
He's definitely taken aback, but he's very kind about it. He declines, revealing that he is with someone. But here's the crazy part. Even with the rejection, the moment is completely electric for her.
The outcome almost doesn't matter.
Right. For the first time in years, Phoebe feels alive. She feels desirable. And most importantly, she feels grounded in her own physical body again.
You really start to realize reading this that the opposite of depression isn't necessarily happiness. It's just vitality. It's the capacity to feel anything at all.
Wow, yes.
For so long, Phoebe felt completely disconnected from her physical self. After years of invasive fertility treatments and a miscarriage, she had been treating her body almost like a failed science experiment, a vessel for grief. But by experiencing raw sexual desire in that hot tub, and by taking the massive risk of rejection without completely crumbling, she proves to herself that she's fundamentally alive. Her body is capable of pleasure, of want, of spontaneity. It's a profound reclamation of her physical self.
That vitality she taps into carries right over into the next morning, which brings us to the comedic climax of this deep dive. The sun comes up, Phoebe wakes up, having survived the night, and room service delivers a plate of what the hotel calls patriotic French toast.
Oh, covered in strawberries and blueberries.
Smothered in bright red strawberries and blueberries. It's this ridiculous, overly festive contrast to the grim morning she had originally planned for herself. And right as she's processing this, Leela, the bride, bursts in. Leela just assumes Phoebe is alive and well and demands she come sailing with the wedding party to help balance the weight of the boat.
It's amazing. She even outfits Phoebe in this absurd, oversized sequin sweater donated by her mother, paired with gift shop sandals that have a giant fake sunflower wedged between the toes.
The imagery is fantastic. It's the ultimate visual representation of Phoebe letting go of her tightly controlled, somber academic persona. She is literally dressing in someone else's glittering, ridiculous armor to face a day she never thought she'd see.
So she just goes along with it.
She does,
Yeah.
which leads to this fantastic car ride dynamic on the way to the boats. They're all crammed into a vintage stick-shift convertible that the bridesmaids rented. But of course, nobody knows how to drive a stick-shift except Phoebe.
So the suicidal wedding crasher is now literally chauffeuring the bridal party.
Exactly. And in the car, we properly meet the supporting cast of this circus. There's Marla, the groom's tightly wound lawyer sister. She actually specializes in sexual harassment law, but hypocritically, she's in the middle of a massive personal scandal because she had an affair with a federal judge.
Always the way.
Then we have the bridesmaids who continue to speak in these identical overlapping cadences. And there's Juice, the groom's fiercely silent, combat boot-wearing 11-year-old daughter. It's a car full of tension, secrets, and completely mismatched personalities. So what does this all mean?
The setup for the twist?
The massive twist. The author builds this chaotic journey perfectly. They arrive at Bowen's Wharf, the top is down, the music is blaring. Layla runs up to her fiancé, the handsome 40-year-old gastroenterologist named Gary. And Gary is the bearded man from the hot tub.
The revelation is stunning for Phoebe. It perfectly knots the narrative threads together in a way that is incredibly satisfying but deeply complicated. The man she explicitly propositioned just hours earlier is the very groom whose wedding she almost derailed with her suicide attempt.
It's so messy.
It forces Phoebe directly into the center of this family's drama. Her isolation is completely shattered. She can't hide in the periphery anymore.
It's the perfect hook to keep you reading. To synthesize all of this for you listening today, this source material is an absolute masterclass in showing how grief and recovery rarely follow a straight, solemn, predictable line. We're often taught by culture and media that healing is this quiet, dignified, linear process. You go to therapy, you journal, you slowly get better.
But that's not real life.
No. Here, salvation arrives dressed in utter absurdity. It arrives in the form of an overbearing, slightly narcissistic bride who is too worried about her floral arrangements to let someone die. It arrives on a room service plate of patriotic French toast. It arrives through an accidental, highly inappropriate romantic connection with the groom in a 3 a.m. hot tub.
That's the beautiful, chaotic takeaway from the text. It reminds you that when you feel entirely stuck in your own plot, when you feel like your narrative has reached a permanent dead end, sometimes the absolute best thing you can do is let yourself be a body on a boat in someone else's story.
I love that phrase, a body on a boat.
By yielding to the absolute chaos of Leela's wedding, Phoebe is forced out of her own head. She's forced to interact, to react, to drive a stick shift, and to eventually laugh. The sheer ridiculousness of other people's lives becomes the unexpected life raft that keeps her afloat.
A life raft made of guanciale-fat cocktail glasses, sequin sweaters, and weird duck stories. It really is a powerful reminder that we don't always have to save ourselves all at once with some grand epiphany. Sometimes we just have to stick around long enough to see how the speech ends or what happens on the sailboat.
This raises an important question for you to consider as we wrap up today's deep dive. We saw how Phoebe's complete detachment from her normal life, the fact that she thought she was at the end of her rope, allowed her to be shockingly, wonderfully honest with Leela and with Gary. So, if you were suddenly stripped of all your carefully constructed societal roles today, your job title, your relationship status, your meticulously planned life trajectory, what is the raw, unfiltered truth, you would finally feel free to speak to a stranger.
Wow, that is definitely something to chew on the next time you find yourself stuck in an elevator. Thank you for joining us as we unpack this incredible narrative. Until next time, keep looking for the surprising twists in your own story.